the fun part of the build begin. Welcome back, guys, to episode 4 or 5? I don't know. Welcome back to another episode of the GTR build. The worst part has come, or at least in my opinion, the worst part. So late last night, I didn't record this because it's just too annoying to record. I mean, it was dark and I was just kind of pulling stuff out, and it's not really interesting. Wiring is not interesting, but it's a good feeling when you wire something and it works, I guess. This is almost every single wire for this car. There is a harness, as you guys already saw, laying on top of the motor, but that's not complicated or hard. All that has to do is go through the passenger side, and it hooks up to the dash harness, which is somewhere in here, and then the ECU, the Apex ECU, hooks into that as well. This is the actual chassis harness, meaning this is the fuse box that sits in the engine bay that then comes through the inside of the fender, runs through the firewall. It's right next to my feet on the driver's side. There's a fuse panel, and then that has a dash harness that runs across, connects to all the controls in the dash, or on the steering wheel, all the cluster, the controls in the dash. Then there's another harness that runs down the right side that connects to the fuel and taillights, and I don't even know what else, but just a bunch of stuff. Now, if somebody just handed me this and told me to like put it in a car, I probably wouldn't, like, that sucks, like really bad. But the fact that I spent multiple hours taking it out, and I had to do every single clip, because it's all OEM, everything in there was OEM, so every single clip I had to pull out myself. So I spent a good amount of time pulling out this harness. So just looking at certain things, I kind of remember already, like, hey, I know this part goes across the engine, this part goes across the dash, this plugs in there. But of course, there's still a lot of things that were already left unplugged for me. Like the whole back end was already unplugged because there is no back end to the front clip, obviously. But luckily, this front clip included the chassis harness, which is very rare, just so you know. Normally, they only include the engine harness. But yeah, I mean, I'll figure it out. Usually, just run it along where it runs factory, and then you'll usually figure out the plugs. Like, it's pretty, you know, just try it. There's really no repeating plugs too much. It's not like you can accidentally plug something else into the fuel. Like, it's always like the fuel sender unit is always like one certain plug. It's not like you can really confuse that type of stuff. The fuse box was kept together for the most part. All the relays, fuses are still plugged in, so I can't get those confused. But yeah, I'm going to start pushing it through. Probably push the fuse box side through first, through the firewall, because that's kind of the hard part. But yeah, in this video, the car should start and run, hopefully. So guys, it's like, I don't know, 2-3 hours later. Like I said, most of this stuff isn't really that interesting, but yeah, I pushed through it. The fuse box That's the fuse box. It doesn't look like a fuse box, but it is, I swear. I connected most of the rough grounds. These grounds are something not involved with the car at all. But I roughly looked over the grounds, did it, realized that the connector, the fuel sender connector, is actually like a 241, I'm pretty sure, because the plugs wouldn't work, so I had to splice the plugs to a 240 plug just for the fuel power, just so I can like start it. I'll probably get a fuel sender for an R34 later so I can have my fuel level work and stuff. But I have the cluster plugged in. I took the battery out of the R32 because it's a Prius battery and that's usually what people use, but this can run a rear mounted battery actually. The front clip had it up here, but since I already have the negative wire, so I don't know, I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and plug in the battery, see what happens, put the key in. I already have the R34 ignition in there with the key that kind of came in the clip. Everything's plugged in that would be essential. But at least the key works. Yeah, you see the little light? That little bulb right there is supposed to be in the keyhole, I believe. Yeah, but then when I turn it to ignition 2, it seems like it just goes off, and then it's like, nope, I'm not a car anymore, sorry. So I think the last time I did this, I kind of did this more of a joke, but it actually turned on the cluster this time. It does the unlock click, but then when you can hear noises going on. See the cluster's on. There's some noises there. I didn't hear anything about the fuel pump priming, so it's not exactly a good sign, but so yeah, it started. Finally, it started after a lot of issues. So I'm gonna explain the issues. I'm gonna explain the issues because I actually recorded a clip before this that said how the starter was bad, but that wasn't true at all. So originally, I thought the starter was bad. There's now a new Nissan forklift starter in there. It actually spins a lot faster and it's a lot more beefier, and it's always good to have a new starter because I don't know how old the original one is. The issue was I took it out and I jumped it with a different battery, and it seems like it was just clicking, it wasn't spinning, and it was always doing that. And I'm not sure, maybe if the battery connection just wasn't good enough to make it spin, but I got a new starter, put it in, same exact issue. You turn the key, it just clicks once. Now the issue with that usually is essentially you're either just not getting enough power to the starter, or you are not grounding the starter properly. It's really just one or the other. A starter is a very, very basic thing. Clearly it's getting the signal when I turn it all the way, that's there and everything like that. So it couldn't really be that, the little signal. So after going through so many things, eventually I literally just took this power cable, bolted it to the negative, bolted off the OEM factory power cable, and bolted this cable onto the pole of the starter. And then, immediately it cranked. Everything is fine. So essentially, what is the OEM power cable that runs in the harness is bad. It is for some reason not getting full power to the starter. I know it was not a ground issue because if it was a ground issue, I didn't even change anything about the grounds. The grounds from the block to the frame rail to the battery were always the same. So it was a power issue, just not enough 12-volt power being delivered to it. That was fixed. Next was my fuel pump. Now, I didn't actually ever fix that. I'm actually going to start investigating that now, but my fuel pump in there right now, it has jumper cables on the connector to it. Now, believe it or not, that's actually a KA fuel pump, so that's a fuel pump meant for a 4-cylinder car. So there's no way that I would actually be able to do like full wide open throttle pulls, but I'm sure it's more than enough fuel to have it idle and run and give it revs and just drive it. That's, I'm not going to, the first drive, I'm not going to be ripping on it anyway. It's just more of like a see everything working, blah blah blah. But I have it jumped to this battery that when I put on this, you can actually probably hear it turn on. it turns on and it runs the fuel. But anyways, I did that. Car still wasn't starting. Like, you know, what the hell? Not starting. So then I moved over here and I took out one of the coil packs, took out a spark plug, connected the spark plug to the coil pack. If you don't have a multimeter and you want a very easy way to see if you're getting spark, leave the spark plug connected to the coil pack in the wiring somewhere, crank the motor, and you'll see it sparking every so often like it should be, because it's not always sparking. It's sparking when the cylinder needs actual, you know, detonation. Now, so okay, we have spark, we confirmed that, blah, blah, blah. Then we moved into, okay, it has to be a fuel issue, because I took carb cleaner, which is, I don't know where it is, but somewhere. I sprayed a full can, well, not a full can, I sprayed a little bit of carb cleaner in there, opened the throttle body, cranked it, immediately fired up, ran for like 2 seconds, but it fired up first crank. So there you go. When you spray carb cleaner, that's an easy way to rule that it's a fuel problem, because if it fires with carb cleaner, that means you have everything else. You have air, you have spark, everything is hooked up. So then fuel, okay, like what are the chances that the fuel injectors aren't working or something like that when the coil packs, when everything else is in this motor? Now, with the fuel lines, I routed it so that the fuel is supposed to enter in the front and it exits out the back, because this is a fuel regulator, and almost always the fuel regulator is the last part of the fuel system, always. Like, I swear, if you Google it, when you install fuel regulator that's sitting here, it's always fuel coming out. Now, it turns out, I have no idea why I have to still do some stuff. My friend's just like, hey, just try it, even though you think you're right, just swap the fuel line, see what happens. I did that, motor immediately fired up, so clearly fuel was going in the wrong way. I'm still very confused about that, because seriously, fuel regulators are like always supposed to be last, but apparently in RBs or something like that, it's totally opposite. Somebody comment down below if you can explain that, but I have installed a fuel regulator before, an aftermarket one on an RB, and that was the same thing. It was getting the fuel last. The fuel would enter the rail, come out, go to the regulator, and then go back to the tank. We ruled out that issue. So yeah, we have a running, working motor. Now, it probably sounded pretty bad. There was a lot of vacuum leaks. First of all, there's a lot of vacuum leaks because there's a lot of vacuum lines that are not connected. And then there's also no intercooler piping. All I did was throw on the intake, because you need the mass airflow sensor to be plugged in for it to read that, and the throttle position sensor need to be kind of plugged in for it to like idle. And as you heard, it idled. It cold started. It kind of ran at a high RPM just because it was a cold start. And yeah, and then I immediately had my fuel pump start. Well, the fuel reservoir started leaking because it was tipped over. And since the power steering pump is now working, that kind of all, yeah, went dirty. But yeah, so we have a running motor. Now, it doesn't run by itself technically, because to make it run, I have been jumping that fuel pump and making it run on its own power. My next thing is to figure out why it's bad, why it's not getting the proper power, because I figured out that the fuel pump relay is one of these, not sure which one. If I'm correct, it's this one, because I know the yellow and black wire is the power wire for the fuel pump, because that's exactly what it is there. So the harness kind of comes up, goes to this relay, and then comes back to the fuel pump. Now, I'm not sure why. I swapped over this relay already a couple of times, still nothing. So I'm really not sure. Worst case scenario, I'm just going to have to run my own power lines to my own relay, to my own thing, to a switch. So instead of it turning on with the thing, I'll just flip a switch and the fuel pump will turn on. That's not really a big issue. That's not hard to do, but I would prefer if it all just kind of worked with a key. But yeah, that's the Skyline. Yeah, it runs. As you probably heard, it's loud because it is literally an open downpipe. There is no downpipe actually. It's just the little elbow from the turbo, and that's it. That turns down, and then there's supposed to be a downpipe to a test pipe to a catback, which I'll have to order eventually. But this is a major step, because as you see, the wires are everywhere. That is on purpose. Everything is just wired to work right now. That's it. That's all I really did, was just to confirm that the motor will start and it will run, and we confirmed that it runs fine. The second it had fuel, it immediately started up first, second crank, with me giving it a little bit of throttle. So that's really good news. And now I can basically kind of disconnect a lot of this stuff, remove the battery, and begin to kind of run everything, so that it's begin to run everything, so I can tuck the harness where it needs to go. Like, this entire harness right here has to be tucked in here. This harness has to go kind of around through the bottom of the engine bay and just clean up everything, redo the grounds to the proper places, and then yeah, we can move on from there. I already ordered all the brake lines and all the
brake master stuff I need to have full brakes for this car, so that'll be in within the week most likely. Hey guys, so I think I'm going to wrap up this video here, because I kind of, for this video, the goal was obviously to start the car, and I kind of ran into some issues with that, but I'm really glad we were able to fight through it and get it running, turnkey, etc. I would start it right now. I've started it since and ran it for a full minute, and you probably heard that it sounds very cammed. Gotta remember that the intake isn't hooked up at all, like the intercooler piping, any of that. So the turbo, which is pushing a ton of air actually out of there, isn't pushing air into the engine like it's used to. Plus it has a ton of open vacuum leaks. And when I closed this big one right here, which is actually for the brake booster, I believe, it didn't sound so cammy, if that makes sense. But then it also smoked a bit, but it smells like crap because I think the gas is bad, because the gas has been in that tank for like maybe 6 to 8 months. I'm not sure when he had the CA18 in here and running and driving, but I think it was like 8 months ago or something like that. But yeah, I ran it for like over a minute. I didn't even realize on the first startup, but the whole cluster works. Obviously the coolant gauge, I didn't see that move simply because the coolant temp sensor, there's no water or anything flowing through there, so it's not going to sense anything. But the RPM worked perfectly fine. It was idling at like 1100 on the cold start, which is pretty, you know, that's what it's supposed to be. When I think I revved it up to like 25, that's all I got to. That oil pressure gauge, I guess that's what you want to call it down there, that one was working, because when I was revving it, the oil pressure was climbing, so that's good. And then it showed a lot of error lights for like seatbelt, airbags, traction control, ABS, because there is no ABS and there is not going to be any ABS. Other things, but the full tack works, including the speedometer too. I guess the speedometer goes off of the transmission. I guess there's a sensor in there, because I put it into gear and I got up to like 20 kmh because the drive shaft wasn't connected. But you guys literally just saw me last night. I started cleaning this. I removed all the wiring and the crap that was in this car when I bought it, or almost all of it, mainly on that side, because there's a ton of broken glass, because the way this car was sitting in Japan in the junkyard, I guess the rear glass got smashed in at some point. And yeah, there's still glass in a lot of places. I mean, you can see it in the corners and stuff like that. But I vacuumed out that whole section and stuff like that, because obviously I'm going to clean everything, vacuum it, and then I'm going to start laying out the harness to where it needs to be OEM. You know, there's still some like clips left of where the harness gets tucked. And then I can, and this is all going to be in the next video, but then I can extract the carpet, which is in this car, which is a full carpet. Believe it or not, sedan and coupe carpet is like exactly the same. This has also a ton of glass in it because of this windshield, so I'm going to have to vacuum this before I take this out. That's kind of been a big concern with the build going on in the backyard, is because the dogs are always walking around. I don't want them to step on glass. And last night, here's a picture. Yoshi, me and Rachel were sitting inside watching TV, and we heard like a big metal like clang, and it turns out that Yoshi jumped in here, so that's why the vacuum is like this, because he literally jumped in the car and he was like standing back there. So I'm really glad I vacuumed all the glass, because otherwise I probably would have gotten glass in his paw or something like that. Coming along, and then the clip you just saw was the drive shaft. I just put in the drive shaft. That's just an OEM drive shaft that came with the car. Fun fact, the sedan and coupe drive shaft are also exactly the same. I didn't think that, because I feel like the sedan is longer, but I guess it's not. It just looks longer or something like that, I don't know. But drive shaft is in. It's not tightened, but it's in. I just slapped it in there. It's pretty easy to install those OEM drive shafts since they fit right and whatnot. And now, yeah, I mean, I just want to kind of get the video up and edit it, since this is a big milestone for the car. But from here on out, like I said, the brake lines are going to be arriving within a week or so. I'm looking for some interior parts, which Broken Sylvia is actually helping me out with, trying to source door cards, because it's impossible in America to find them, because they're like super overpriced if you even find them. And yeah, a lot of you say to go check out Broken Sylvia, and I did a long time ago. Actually, I watched his original build video like when they first came out. Like, actually, I think it came up on my recommended, and I really like this production value. But yeah, a lot of you guys like think that I wouldn't know who that is, but I do. We talked on Instagram and stuff. Yeah, his car is so much better than this one. I would firmly say that his car is absolutely immaculate condition, whereas in my case I bought an immaculate condition R32 to replace that, which is actually right over this thing. Yeah. I love that car so much. I only drive that car once a week, so you know, that's my immaculate GTR. But this one's kind of gonna be a lot of you ask my plans for it, and I don't really know what plans, because I don't like, ever since my old builds, I don't like saying what I want to do with cars, because that means I'll never do it. But this is supposed to be kind of just like a street car. I don't want to call it a beater because I'm trying to make it look very nice, but it is technically a beater compared to the 32, because the 32 is all original and it's a rare spec color and it's like original and it's actually worth money, and the longer I keep it, the more money it's worth. So that car's more of an investment car, whereas this car, put it this way, if I had a choice between selling this or the 32 when they're complete, I would probably sell the 32 only because I bought that built and it's worth a lot more money. Whereas this being a wrecked car and not even being a GTR and stuff, I mean, in the States they're still overpriced as hell, but still, like, I'd probably want to keep the car that I built from scratch myself, obviously, because you have a more emotional attachment to you. But a lot of the time it is just way cheaper and way more economical to buy the super nice built car. Trust me, kids, it's cheaper to buy a built car most of the time. But yeah, that's the plans with this is just kind of, I don't know, a street car that I would like to track. I really, really, really want to track a car. I've been saying that for years now, and I've only really tracked a motorcycle. But I've been wanting to track a car forever and get like a ton of seat time and get used to driving cars like actually really well, because all I do is really rip around the local canyon with the 32. And I mean, I go pretty hard in it, but still, like, it's not exactly the safest environment to be doing that stuff. So I really want a car to, I guess, put to the limit. And that's also why I'm keeping this fairly stock, although this is technically tuned and it makes more boost, and it's an RB25 Neo. This thing probably makes like around 300 wheel, which is I'm totally content with, because that's more than enough horsepower. Because even in the canyon, that on Octane puts down 350 wheel, and that's like more than enough for the canyon. But I just want like a reliable setup where I don't really have to worry about it too much. Just kind of build it nicely, not worry about problems, and just be able to get a ton of seat time in it. Track it. Does that mean it'll be caged someday? Who the hell knows? If I really, really, really like it and I pursue tracking and time attack a lot more with it, maybe I'll cage it fully one day and turn it into like a full race car. But currently I don't want to go towards that route of, oh, let's build a full race car, because what if you don't even like it, you know? So that's kind of my plan for this thing, is just to enjoy it. You know, Rachel will probably drive this and I'll drive that, because that thing, the twin disc clutch, is super hard to drive. And I don't know how the clutch is in this, but it's probably easier than that. So it'd be cool to just mob with two cars. But yeah, I mean, yeah, this thing's gonna be cool. I'm really glad that I got it started running, because honestly, that's the peak in any build, is getting it running, in my opinion. That's like by far the hardest part of the build. After that is pretty, I guess, easy besides paint. I mean, everything's there, but this is why I decided to paint the engine bay and then swap the motor in, because it just speeded up this whole process, because I was waiting for the GTR parts and I'm waiting for one V-spec splitter. If you don't know and you're still watching, a lot of you ask about, oh, what do you need parts-wise? Like, it looks like you have nothing. I actually do have a lot of stuff. I have, like I said, almost the full interior besides the door cards, rear seats, which I found a set in Miami, so I'll order that within a week or two, and a rear speaker deck, or rear parcel shelf, it's called in other countries. Then I have a complete full interior, like complete OEM full interior. Besides seats, I want R34 GTR seats, but they're like 5K, so I might just get like 33 GTR seats, or I don't know. I want OEM seats because they pass track safety, and if you go aftermarket, you have to have a single piece bucket seat. 2-piece reclinables don't pass aftermarket track safety, so that's kind of like a weird comfort thing. But panel wise, in that shed is the whole interior. I have rear quarter panels, rear GTR quarter panels. You guys that have been following this from the beginning, this build, know I have bought that when I was buying stuff for this car. A good friend, Mike, in Pennsylvania, that has a lot of 34s, he sourced a lot of parts directly from Nissan for me, and they're priced very, very well. From brand new from Nissan. Everyone else overprices everything, Nismo and Nissan, but OEM Nissan's got the goods. They do still make 34 parts. They make 32 heritage parts also. But for 34s, I have brand new, everything I'm listing, brand new. Rear bumper GTR, front bumper GTR, front fenders, front wings, whatever you want to call it, GTR, rear quarters, GTR. I do not have a hood. I'm probably going to get a C-Bond vented hood, carbon, just because I don't care for OEM. It's just it's good looking, but it's plain. I want the vents. I have the core support, not the core support, the bumper brackets that go bolt to the crash bar right here. GTR, I have GTR hood hinges because GTR hoods are different hinges than GTT hoods. I don't know why. And I have a new windshield from Nissan, which is a lot cheaper because it was like $550, and that's still a lot for a windshield, but every importer asks like $1,000+ for R34 glass in America. I have quarter windows. Hopefully I won't break those taking them out when I need to do the quarter panels. Hopefully they're like about $200 each if I do.